look, I'm not going to own or operate it. I've got to put somebody in place there. So I need to negotiate a little bit more off the purchase price. And that's okay for you. And that's what you should do if that's what you're going to, how you're going to operate the business. The only challenge is that if you're competing against lots of other buyers that are owner operators, they're not going to need a lower value for the business. They're not going to put somebody else in there to operate it. So you just get a little bit more challenged in terms of the ability to negotiate, because you're going to have to hire somebody to run it.
That's interesting. That is a very interesting perspective. And I think that the kind of the moral of this is you've got to figure out, as you said, 99% of the people are owner operators, but most, you said, of the vast majority of those are not 40 plus hours a week operating day in, day out. They're still involved, maybe to the extent that they choose to be involved, but they don't have to be involved. They're not the linchpin around which everything hinges and makes the business operate. And that is what makes a business less valuable.
In today's ultra-competitive business world, being a successful entrepreneur or business owner can be very challenging. Fortunately, contemporary times have blessed us with resources for tackling those challenges and getting us to success more quickly than we could have imagined. Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs grow incredible companies. This podcast looks at the 5 keys to unlocking success as an entrepreneur. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason's mission is to use his gifts of teaching and leadership to help others get the results they want out of life. Join Jason every week and learn the keys to grow a truly successful business.
Well, welcome to another edition of the show. My name is The Real Jason Duncan, and thank you for tuning in today. If you are watching this on YouTube, you see I'm shooting this episode today from my home office in the great city of Gallatin, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. And I'm honored that you've decided to tune in, especially if you're watching on YouTube. We actually have more downloads and views on YouTube than any of the podcast players. Really appreciate you doing that. So if you haven't looked at YouTube, go to youtube.com/TheRealJasonDuncan. And there's lots of videos in there, but there's one playlist called The Root of All Success that you can subscribe to, hit the bell icon. And every time we upload a new video from a podcast, or any of the videos for that matter, you'll be notified. So make sure you hit that bell icon. And we do release videos on the channel frequently, that not just podcast videos, but we release podcasts twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays, generally speaking. But thank you for being here. If you're listening on any of the podcast players, I want to give a big shout out to the C-Suite Radio Network. You heard the intro at the beginning, and you heard some other podcast sponsors, and that's because we're syndicated on the C-Suite Radio Network. So thank you to Jeffrey Hazlett and his team for letting us be sponsored, or to be syndicated, and that gets us out on all the podcast players. So thank you for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do that. You know the drill. Podcast hosts always are telling you to do that, but there's a reason, because we want to make an impact. And we know that the more people who listen to the show, who rank the show, it makes more impact. So today's episode sponsor is 8Bend Marketing. So 8Bend is a company based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They are one of the top story brand marketing companies in the country. And story brand, for those of you who don't know, story brand is Donald Miller's brand, where he talks about how you've got to create your brand around a story. And it's a fantastic way of making the words not only grab people's attention to get attraction, but convert. So here's why I love 8Bend and what they do is I have a coaching client of mine who brought to me a couple of years ago new copy for their website and their sales material. And I said, who did this? This is fantastic. It was so good. I'd never seen anything that clear and concise and to the point. And they said, it was 8Bend. So I reached out to Josh Davis, the owner of 8Bend down in Chattanooga, said, hey man, we need to meet. We need to talk. I actually engaged him to do some copywriting for some of my websites and some of the stuff that I do. And now I'm honored that they are sponsoring today's show. So if you, as an entrepreneur, want someone who is a professional to sit down and do a strategy session with you to get your copy done right, reach out to 8Bend Marketing, and they've got a special for you. Go to that's the number 8, BEND, 8Bend.marketing. So it's not a .com URL. So it's 8Bend.marketing/root. And if you go through that link, they're going to give you a special discount on their strategy session, where they'll sit down with you for 4 to 6 hours and really dig into the strategy of writing your content for your website, whatever it is that you need. So it's big thanks to Josh, his team at 8bin Marketing. So now, with all that being said, it's time to introduce our guest on the show today. After building, buying, or selling half a dozen of his own companies, today's guest, Joe Valley, helped build one of the leading online-focused M&A advisory firms in the world. He's facilitated over $500 million in exits, and he wrote a book called The EXITpreneur's Playbook, which we're actually going to talk about and link today, because this guy's story about wanting people to exit is exactly what you know that I do as the real Jason Duncan. My exit accelerator coaching cohort, my exit mastermind group, my exit without exiting mantra. This guy helps people do the final full exit. So I'm gonna love talking to this guy today, where his EXITpreneur's Playbook, it helps online business owners get the maximum value and the best deal when they structure to seek their eventual and incredible exit. And over the last 9 years, he's mentored thousands of online entrepreneurs, so people that have online e-commerce businesses, whose goal was to eventually exit. He is a certified mergers and acquisitions professional and a frequent guest on masterminds, podcasts, and events for entrepreneurs worldwide. And I'm honored that he's on the show today. With his book, The EXITpreneur's Playbook, How to Sell Your Online Business for Top Dollar, he shares real life stories of successful and failed exits. We're actually going to talk about some failed exits today on the show. And he teaches in the book readers how to reverse engineer a pathway to their own eventual exit. Before joining the team in 2012, he sold his own business through the company Quiet Light, which he now is a partner in. And he's a best-selling author, a guest speaker, a podcaster, EXITpreneur. I love that term, an advisor, and a partner, as I said, in Quiet Light Brokerage. Please join me welcoming today my guest, the one and only Joe Valley. Hey, Joe, thank you for being on the show today, man. I'm so honored that you're here. I'm glad that we were able to meet each other, and I'm glad you're doing the show today. Thanks.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, so you've had quite the story as an entrepreneur now, and what you refer to as EXITpreneur. And I don't know if you've trademarked that or not, but I think you should, because I'm gonna steal it if you don't. Because
that's a whole story in itself. I've tried. I'm fighting with somebody that you would, everybody on the listening would know who they are. I'm fighting with them about it.
Yeah, well, that's a weird thing. But so why don't we start right here, man? Why don't we start with your entrepreneurial beginning? Like, how did you get started as an entrepreneur? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was always in me, right? I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur. That doesn't mean that I took a direct path from college to entrepreneurship, because, you know, as a kid, you still have doubts and you think you need to do certain things like get a job. Which I did, of course, but, you know, I really I didn't have a job that lasted more than 6 months until I was 29 years old, believe it or not. And then that job lasted about 3.5 years. And it was really an entrepreneurial job, because the company that I worked for had, you know, I was employee number 34. We did 17 million in revenue in 1994 when I joined them. 34 million in 95 and 105 million in 96. And they actually lost money in 96 when they did 105 million. The owner made about $5 million when he did 34 million. Lots of good lessons there.
And isn't that weird how you can make more revenue and make less money?
It's ego. It's ego. He's only focused on the top line, putting lots of bodies. We had over 1,000 people by the time I left in 1997. And Jason, I needed to leave because it was no longer an entrepreneurial organization. I used to try to be the first one in and the last to leave. And I used to compete with this guy, Andy, all the time. And it was fun and exciting and different things going on. And we could make decisions and move the needle. And by the time I left, there were 1,000 people marching into the offices every day. And it was awful. It's not what I wanted. And it felt awful.
What kind of business was it?
It was in the direct marketing business. So very much like, you know, the internet is today, we were doing radio and television ads, and we had our own call center and fulfillment center. We were selling products and lots of salespeople, you know, taking inbound calls. And I had all sorts of different roles in that organization, from initially being a salesperson to media buying to product development, client relations, things of that nature. And I needed to leave because I was unhappy and vocal. And the vocal part of it is the problem. I was vocal about someone in the organization that was actually a good friend initially, but this person got promoted to their level of incompetence, as I put it, right? They only rose through the organization because of relationships, not because of skills, which is typical of the corporate world. And that's what this company became. So I had to bail. I had to get out. I gave my notice. I gave my notice, and I was going to go back on the sales floor while I figured out what I was going to do. I was going to take the easy job in the company. I'm most flexible. And they said, yeah, Joe, this isn't, you can't talk badly about this person and then go slide into the division that this person runs. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm out. And then I launched my first business as an adult. You don't want to hear about my paper route and my worm farm and all this other stuff as a kid, but my first adult or grown-up business, not adult business. That's a different thing altogether. I launched a media buying agency. And it was with a client that we turned down at the old organization. And I remember, I was making about $35,000 at the company that I left, Jason. And that was down from 55 because of cuts and things were getting tough, in 97. My goal was to make $50,000 in 1998. And through hard work, for the first 5 months, I worked full time, nights and weekends, working more than 40 hours while running my business and getting it launched. So I had really, I was putting in 80 to 90 hours a week, but by the end of probably first quarter in 98, it was fully focused on the business. Instead of $50,000, I made about $500,000, and it's taxable income, not gross revenue. So I got off to a good start as an entrepreneur, and haven't stopped since. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah. So 50,000 seems like ages ago, doesn't it? I mean, I
yes.
remember in my 20s wanting to make 50, and then and I remember at some point like, oh, wouldn't it be great to make 100,000 a year? 6 figures seems so amazing. And it's funny how as you go through those gates, to the next level, thinking about how, like, I can't even imagine as an entrepreneur what it would be like to have to go back to one of those lower revenue or income levels, only because it's Parkinson's law, which is a luxury once enjoyed soon becomes a necessity. So, when you start making $500,000 a year, it's hard to go back, because you're now making the impact, you're doing the things, going to places, meeting the people. It's hard to go back, but that's the life of the entrepreneur, isn't it? I mean, it's up and down, but mostly up.
Oh, I've had down years too, though. I mean, I've filed tax returns where I've lost $250,000. That's just part of the ride. Now there's 2 different events where I made some big purchases. One was a business, and it was a very bad decision. Got hit by a Google algorithm update about 30 days after I bought it, and traffic just tanked. I lost about $280,000 that year on that business. And then I bought a house, an investment property in 2006. Right, just before the market crashed. So wow. I bought it, 10 steps above the peak, and then it took me 4 years to sell it at about a $200,000 loss. So, yeah, it's funny when you think, I don't have to pay any taxes. I've got carry forward losses. This is great. That's just part of entrepreneurship too.
Yeah, well, and I think that's also part of what infuriates me about bankers and how banks don't understand the I guess the unique nature of entrepreneurship and business ownership. Because, I've got years, especially with one of the businesses that I own, I've got a lot of tax deductions because of energy credits, because we're in one of my business energy space. And so I know a lot of other businesses have the same thing. So when your income shows negative on your tax return, that's not reality. Like I can't make negative money and pay my bills. I made enough money to pay the bills, but it shows that I made negative of 1.4 million or whatever that number happens to be. Yeah. And the banker's like, well, you can't afford this mortgage. Well, what? I don't even understand what you mean. So finding that unique banker, which I found to be able to understand that, is an entrepreneur's friend. And I think that we all as entrepreneurs need that.
Absolutely. I got some words of advice from my mentor out on a golf course, Uncle Walter. He said, Joe, if there's one thing I can tell you as an entrepreneur, and he was an entrepreneur, is always have a line of credit set up, because you may not ever need it, but when you do, it's going to be critical that you have quick access to it. I didn't listen to him. And after I sold my business in 2010, my last e-commerce business in 2010, I didn't have a job, right? But I had about $1 million equity in my house. And I thought, okay, Walter's right. I should go get that line of credit set up. And I went to do it as a HELOC. And they said, Mr. Valley, you don't have a job. We can't do a HELOC for you. You have no income. Yet I've got $1 million equity in my home and a whole bunch of money in the market, plenty of net worth, but I couldn't get a line of credit. So my advice right now, early on for listeners, is get yourself a line of credit set up. You may never need it, but get it set up just for the off chance that you do, or if a great opportunity comes along your way and you need to act quickly.
Yeah, I had that is fantastic advice, and people definitely need to take it, because here's the rule. The rule of thumb is the bank will loan you money when you don't need it and will not loan you money when you need it. That's the rule of thumb. And I don't care if they say, well, that's not fair. That's not how we listen. That's the reality. Us entrepreneurs know that to be a fact. Joe, your example is exactly right. You have plenty of net worth, plenty of opportunity, plenty of collateral to collateralize whatever money they would give you. Yet when you need it, not going to give it to you. But if you'd have waited a year and you made $2 million in personal income that year, oh yeah, we'll give you a $2 million line of credit. Well, I don't need it right now.
Right.
I've got plenty of money. So yeah, go get it before you need it, because when you need it, you won't get it. So
exactly.
So let's talk about online businesses, because that's where you're at. That's your space. Mm-hmm. And you actually, I don't remember specifically how this came up when we started talking, but I own one of the businesses that I own is an online. It's an e-commerce business that we have on a large e-commerce site that everybody would know, rhymes with Amazon. I'm on there, I'm on there selling products, and I'm learning. It's a weird business model, at least to me, because I'm not used to being on e-commerce. But that's your gig. That's what that's what Quiet Light Brokerage does. You're a partner in that, and that's what you wrote your book, the EXITpreneur's Playbook, about. So why online? What is it about online that attracted you to get into online? And tell me a little bit about why online.
The freedom and flexibility, first and foremost. I always wanted to work from home, that entrepreneurial life. I didn't want to have to go to an office or a building or a warehouse, or be geographically, constrained in any way, shape, or form. When a little company called Go to My PC first came out back in like 04, 05, I heard the ad and I signed up, went across the hall, logged into my computer from across the hall, went home and said, honey, we're going to Florida for the wintertime. She's like, what? No, we're not doing that. And then we did for 5 years. So that freedom and flexibility, is, that's what online is about. You can operate most of the businesses that we work with from anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And that's the attractiveness for me. In addition to the fact that, I was talking to my business partner, we've been at this for 14 years now. Quiet Light's been around for 14 years. I joined in 2012, just after I sold my business, took a year off, and then I joined, and he and I are partners now. We're at the tip of a rocket ship. And the rocket ship is, this online business, building, buying, selling. We're trying to figure out if we are just holding on to the rocket ship for dear life, or if we're standing on the top of it, steering it, right, with our capes on. We're trying to get the capes on. But it's a great industry. It's a great place to be. And it's full of people that are jeans and t-shirt wearing, people that I can sit across the table from, having a beer and a good conversation. So I just love the space. I love the people, and I love where it's going. I love the freedom and flexibility. With COVID, even my 84-year-old father shops primarily online now. So it is the future, and the present, I guess, too.
So what was your first online business, yours personally?
So when I left that other company, I started a media buying agency, but within about 4 months, I launched my first product as well. And it was a fitness program where we sold supplements and a 15-minute workout program by a guy named Jamie Brankus, who did 8-minute abs, 8-minute buns. And we were doing radio and eventually television, and we didn't have a website. And so I spent $50 and put a website together, and we just started getting sales like that, right?
Marketing agencies run and hide $50.
It was $50, but that was back in 1998. So that was my first online business, but it was, the online part of it was, an afterthought. The revenue that drove it was primarily radio. And then of course, when you're successful on radio, you do a television commercial, and I dropped about $100,000 on that and maybe made about half of it back. But my real focus was radio. And then it was just a trickle effect. I did well online as well. It was no advertising, no spending. I didn't even spend any money on, Google Ads at the time. But that one led to the next product that I launched in 2002. And again, success on radio, success on television, but I took it 100% online in 2005 because I just had enough of call centers. I didn't own the call center. I outsourced it, and I had to try a lot of different ones because just turnover in call centers and people, you got to always have safety backups. And customer service. I had in-house customer service. I had 12 people, and my kryptonite is managing people. I don't do that well because I just think they should just do their job and get it done and stop complaining. And no, you don't need another cigarette break. So I took the last business 100% online. It was me and one other person, and I ran that from 2005 to 2010 through the best of the economy and the absolute worst of the economy. Came out the other end, tired, exhausted, wanted to move on, and sold it in late 2010.
So when you're selling an online business, it would seem to me, because I've never done it, like the online business that I own, I'm bootstrapping, starting from scratch, right? So I didn't buy one and I haven't sold one yet, but I would assume that selling an online business is in some ways not any different than selling a brick and mortar or a traditional business, but in other ways would be completely different. Tell me a little bit about the differences and the similarities.
Yeah. So the difference is that your buyer could be anywhere in the world. That's the number one. So when you're selling a brick and mortar business, you work with a brick and mortar broker that knows the area very well. And people that live in your area are going to find them, look in the paper, look at their listings, and go see the business. In the online world, it's somebody from, across the country, across the world. And so you need to reach all of those folks in the way that you can. And, you really, the biggest mistake I'll tell you right now that people make when they're selling their business on their own is they don't get the numbers right. That's the biggest mistake that they make, is they don't do a proper job of calculating discretionary earnings, which is how businesses are sold, a multiple of that. And in most cases, there aren't really a lot of assets in the business. There's not a lot of equipment and manufacturing stuff. In the brick and mortar stuff, there's real estate, there's equipment for making sandwiches or whatever it might be. In the online world, you can do it from anywhere. All you need is a laptop, and you ship stuff to your fulfillment center, and that's it. Huge difference in terms of the assets of the business and the way that you put the financials together.
So I can see that for sure, and I wonder if your experience in that is why you wrote the EXITpreneur's Playbook, or did you write the book to get more clarity? So which one came first? Did you have the clarity in how it's done and then write the book, or write the book to get the clarity?
It's funny because I wrote the book to help more people have clarity. But in the process of writing it, it gave me more clarity and more systems and everything that they needed to know and see. Quiet Light was founded, with education first in mind. We're not your typical M&A firm where we're here to just, make money, but education first. Our 10-year pinnacle is to have all online entrepreneurs use our material to help them understand the value of their business and sell it. It says nothing about us selling it. It's just to help them and educate them. So the trouble with blogs and posts and podcasts and things like that is there's bits and pieces all over the place, and you have to find those and track them and click links and all that good stuff. And sometimes it's really hard to sit down, with a glass of wine or a beer, your cocktail of choice, or ginger ale, whatever, and cuddle up with your laptop, right? And so I needed to pull all of it together in one place so that any single person can digest it either on their Kindle or if they get to hear my voice eventually as I'm doing the audio version of it, or the book, and really digest it bits and pieces and highlight it and dog ear it and go back to it and as they need it, because it's a lot of information to absorb all at once. And that's what I found over and over and over again. People just couldn't absorb everything that needed to be absorbed. And then they just went, that's all right, I'll get to it. I'm not ready to sell. I don't need to know that. And that's the absolute wrong approach. I'm not ready to sell. I'm not going to pay attention to this. I guarantee you, when they have that mentality, they're going to lose money in the sale of their business.
What are in your book, the EXITpreneur's Playbook? What's the top one or two or three things that you teach in the book to get ready for that exit?
Well, there's the first thing is pretty simple, actually, Jason, but it's complicated as well, because most people don't do it, and it's so simple. They're like, yeah, whatever, I don't need to do that. And that's just setting goals, right? And I'm not talking about setting a goal of, I want to sell my business for $5 million, because that's a dream. That's not a goal. The goal should be, include dollars, $5 million, a date when you want to do it, and how you want to feel when you sell it. And I added the last one in there because I've done this hundreds of times. And every time we close a transaction and I talk to, someone, I'm like, how do you feel? How's it feel? They're like, man, an incredible burden is lifted off my shoulder. Or, I'm debt free and I'm going fishing for a month. I feel fantastic. Those types of things. So that emotion needs to be tied into it. So I want to sell my business, or I'm going to sell my business for $5 million in Q1 of 2023. And I'm going to feel unburdened because I will have money in the bank. I'll be debt free and I get to spend more time with my family. That's a goal. And why do you need that? Because as an entrepreneur, you're going to have some pretty awful days and weeks and months. And unless you know where you're going and what your objective is, those are going to, be tough to get through over and around. And then you've got to reverse engineer a path to that dollar date feeling goal. Yeah, I want to sell my business for $5 million, Q1, 2021, 2023, et cetera. But if you don't know what your business is worth today, you don't know how to get there. And that's the biggest thing that people don't do. They're afraid to firm up the value of their business and get some advice. So, the book, the details, everything in there is going to get you pretty close. You should be able to have a pretty firm idea of what your business is worth through a combination of the book itself and then looking at actual listings and talking, ultimately, I think somebody should talk to a qualified advisor, but they could read the book, do their own math, do their adjustments, and then look at listings from, you and I talked about it, Centurica, right? They're an aggregator. They pull in all the listings from all the different M&A firms, and you can see what businesses are listed for. So you get a pretty good idea. So you know your goal, you know your dollars, you know your date, you're feeling, and then you figure out where you are today. If you live in Chicago, and you're going to Boise, Idaho, you put it in Google Maps to get there, but Google can't tell that you're in Chicago, you're not going to get to Boise, Idaho. Simple as that. So you got to reverse engineer a path to that goal by figuring out where you are today.
Well,
most people don't do that.
I love that you added, how do you want to feel? I think that's so important, because I know that, and I teach this to my clients, especially when I'm training sales teams, or when I'm talking to any entrepreneur about sales in general, is that all decisions to make a purchase, they're all made emotionally and they're justified with logic. So like, for instance, when you buy a house, like you emotionally are attached to the house, and then you're like, well, how much does it cost? Well, it's $1 million. Okay, I can afford that. Yeah. Like if you are emotionally attached and you want it, you've made the decision, and then you got to justify it. And it's 20 million. Oh, well, I can't do that. So so you don't just go and look for $1 million houses. You're looking for the one that you like. You're looking for the one that you're emotionally attached to. So I love what you did there with the business on exiting. Okay, make a goal of the date, which is what everybody does. Okay, I want to sell it for $5 million, first quarter 2023. But how do you want to feel at that moment? Do you want to feel super stressed? Do you want to feel great? How do you want to? I love that you added that. But let me dig in, if I could, because I think you just said something that I think listeners, I don't talk a lot on this show about the technical stuff. As a matter of fact, I just interviewed another M&A guy, but not in the online world, just the other day. We did the live show in Nashville. I know you and I are doing by Zoom right now, but we were talking, and we didn't really get into the technical stuff, but some of the stuff he said has got my brain clicking. So I want to ask you, if you don't mind, because on the online businesses, what I'm looking at, like I've got on my phone pulled up in front of me, I've got this Centurica alert, which you were the one that told me about this, and it's all online businesses. And I just set up an alert to show me what's out there. And this particular one, I don't want to give too much away, but it's an FBA business, which is Fulfilled by Amazon business. They are asking about $500,000, 465 for the business, and they're showing an annual profit or seller's discretionary income SDE or earnings SDE 155. How did they come up with that $456,000 price based on that? Because it says the multiple is 2.99, but like how did that happen? Is there a rule of thumb to how you value that online business?
Yeah, well, there's two components to it. The first is just math, right? It's calculating sellers discretionary earnings, or SDE as you called it. And that's where most people will get it wrong. But chapter 11 in the EXITpreneur's Playbook will help everybody with that. And in fact, you can download the chapter for free. It's on EXITpreneur.io. But that's the math and logic part. The other part of it is the difficult part of getting to that 3-time multiple ballpark is the art part. And it's more like 90% of it. And you've got to look at, 4 factors that buyers are always focused on. And that's risk, growth, positive or negative, transferability of the business, and documentation, the financials. So the older a business, the less risk theoretically, because it's more stable, it's got more customers, more SKUs, things of that nature. If a business has 1 or 2 hero SKUs, the multiple is probably going to be a little lower because it's more risk. So higher risk, higher risk, lower multiple, lower risk, higher multiple. So you got to look at those 4 factors. And that's where you really need somebody to have some experience that understands the different things that buyers are looking for, what they can accept, what they cannot, and then what things actually close at, right? With Centurica, you're going to see what things are listed at. And that's all you'll get from all of the M&A firms, unless you're working with one directly, and they'll firm up exactly where your multiple is because of what things have actually sold at. So in many ways, it's comp driven, right? Like you're selling your house, and the broker will look at comps and they'll show you what things have sold at. It's driven by that in many, many ways. But it's as simple as, well, this house has, Formica floors and Formica countertops, and this one has marble countertops and beautiful hardwood floors. The second one's going to have more value because it's just upgraded a little bit. Online businesses are very much the same way, but there's no central location that you can go to look at comps. That's the huge, big difference, because nobody shares that information publicly. You may be able to go to Biz by Sell and see some of it, but nobody worth their salt in the online world is, submitting, what things are selling for there. It's just not a tool that anybody uses anymore. Maybe in the brick and mortar space.
Well, when you talk about SDE, or sellers discretionary earnings, I know that people fudge those numbers or not. And what I don't mean is they're lying. That's not what I mean. Although I'm certain some people are lying, but that can be found out pretty quickly in due diligence. But what I mean is they fudge it by adding back things that actually is not part of the seller's discretionary earnings. Are you finding that to be more or less true in the online space as opposed to traditional businesses?
Yeah, I don't work with traditional businesses, so I can't tell you specifics there. On the online space, what I find is, most people think that their business is worth a heck of a lot less than it is because they don't know what a proper ad back schedule looks like. Using ad backs is all math and logic oriented. It's black and white. There should be no gray, because when it's gray, like you said, it's tricky and they're lying. It's fuzzy math, as Al Gore said once upon a time, and you lose that trust, right? And trust is everything, because you're not sitting across the table from that owner at the local, restaurant where you're talking with them. You are talking to somebody on the other side of the country or world. And the data and the information has to be clean and accurate. And that trust has to be strong. If that trust is eroded because you got a little tricky on ad backs, then you're not going to sell your business at a good deal structure. You may still get it sold, but they're going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to give you all cash, because they're not going to tell you this, I don't trust you. It's just like, I need an earn out. I need you to help me, finance this business through an earnout, which is the worst possible thing that, people don't like those.
Well, when I talk about exiting, because that is the central thing that I do on a daily basis, is I'm working with entrepreneurs, and as my apprentice Matt said one time, he said, Jason, what you really do is you show small business owners how to become entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs are just, they're business owners with a job they created for themselves. But what I teach them about exiting and the concept is there's really three types of exits. There's the full, complete exit, physically, financially. You sell, walk away, you're done, 100%. Earn out might be involved, but like ultimately you're done physically, financially, you're done. Then there's the financial exit, which is what I teach, which is exit without exiting. It's you still get, or excuse me, I said financial, I meant physical. There's the physical exit, which is what I teach, which is exit without exiting. You physically exit the business, but you maintain ownership and all the financial benefits. So you didn't sell it, you still own it, but you exited it. So it's exit without exiting or exit without selling. Mm-hmm. And then the third way is probably the worst way. And that is the financial exit, but not physically. And that is a long-term earn out where you have to stay in for a long time physically, but you did get a big check, or at least a portion of that big check up front. Yeah. In the online world, it sounds to me like Quiet Light Brokerage is only working with people to do the complete full exit. Am I reading that right? Because I got to follow.
You are. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I thought. So,
yeah, there's no doubt. The larger the business gets, like back when I first started, the average transaction size might have been $150,000, and now it's $2 million, right? And we're doing stuff in the, $250,000 range up to 25 million. The larger they get, the more creative the deal structure is. You're not going to get, a $25 million check at closing and then spend 90 days helping the owner understand the business and then you leave. But the typical, and this is the training and transition language in an asset purchase agreement, and this is how simple it gets, is that the seller of the business will be there in training and transition for up to 40 hours over the first 90 days after closing. That's it, right? The business should be that simple and that clean to operate. They're not going to work for the buyer of the business. They're not operating the business for them. You, Jason, would be operating the business, and I'd be here to help you understand what to do. The better I am with that documentation, one of those 4 things I talked about, the easier my job is going to be after I sell the business to you, because there's going to be so many SOPs that if this happens, you do that. If that happens, you do that over there. You may not need to call me or text me or spam me or whatever, but it's number one is the most often way. When you and I first chatted a couple of weeks ago, I thought exit without exiting. That is brilliant in many, many ways. The challenge with the online world for most of the people that we work with is that the businesses are relatively young and not established, meaning they're less than 5 years old. And you have people from all over the world. Again, so you might not hire somebody, you might work from home, so you might not be able to find somebody remotely to step in and do what you do so you can step away. Our business again is 14 years old. I'm 55 years old. My business partner is in his 40s. He's got 8 kids. We'd be hypocrites if we didn't, do our own exit planning. We may never, it may be to our team, but the idea of exit without exiting is absolutely on the plate. So I think what you teach is pretty damn cool and pretty smart as well.
Well, thank you. And I'll send you a check later. Thank you for that.
Well, it's your audience. They've already sold on you. So I'm just learning.
Well, I think, but this was going to be my follow-up question. So I assumed that, yes, you're helping through Quiet Light Brokerage, and your book really is all about the total, complete walk-away exit, which is what most people think about when they think the term exit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think what I do, as you just talked about, is a brilliant play on the concept in a different way that you would have thought of. It's like, hey, you can get all the tax and financial benefits and still, but also experience the exit lifestyle where you're out, you've cashed out, but you still get continued. Anyway,
let me just respond to that real quickly, Jason. Yeah. There's actually, I go over all the different types of deal structures that could happen on an exit. It's not just, hey, we only do 100% cash. There's all sorts of different components to a sale that can happen. And I go through each of those. And one of them is not quite exit without exiting, but when you do an equity roll. So, we recently sold a business for a guy named Johnny. Johnny knew that he could get his business to 20 million in revenue, and he did. The problem was that he knew the business could get up to 100 million in revenue, but he wasn't the guy to take it there. So he sold to a company that could take it there, but he did a 25% equity roll, which means that, let's just say he sold for $10 million, much more than that, but $10 million. He only got 7.5 million. 2.5 million went into the new co, and he owns 25% of that new company, and that other people that bought it are going to take it to 100 million. Johnny's going to have a second exit that's going to be much larger than his first. And he's going to be in a strategic advisor. He's not in the grind every day. That's the key thing. Not in the grind every day.
And that Joe is exactly where I wanted to go with this, because this is why exiting is so important. And if you want to exit totally, what I'm about to ask about is one of the critical pieces. I'm an investor in businesses. I own 8 businesses right now. I'm looking to buy another one. I'm always looking at deals, and I'm very grateful for you telling me about Centurica. And I don't know, people can go look that up to kind of get that aggregator to send you these opportunities. And you know what the first thing is? Not the first, but one of the top things I look at every time I'm analyzing a deal: how involved is the owner?
Yeah.
Is he, as you just said, in the grind every day? And if he is, or she, whatever, but if he or she is in the grind, if he, like, I'm looking at, to be candid, I'm looking at, I love motorcycles, and I would love to own a motorcycle dealership, because it would be a passion project of mine, even though I do not want to run a motorcycle dealership every day. But some of them I'm looking at, the owners are the general managers. They are the finance managers. They are the number one sales guy. And I immediately go, not interested.
Yeah.
So when you're valuing as a broker, as an M&A person, how much does that devalue the company when the owner is in the grind?
Well, it all depends upon your definition of the grind, right?
Yeah.
99% of the businesses that we work with, there is an owner operator of the business. 90% of the time, they're working less than 30 hours a week. And then probably 50% of the time, they're working less than 20, right? These businesses, they did grind it out early on for the first 2 or 3 years, but then it gets to a point where they've systematized it, and their total workload isn't what it once used to be. And they've taken some of those daily menial tasks and they've outsourced it to a VA that can do it efficiently at a much lower cost. But there's always, 99% of the time, an owner operator. And they're valued as if the buyer of the business is also going to be an owner operator, yet many of them are not. And some of them, in that case, there's the rise of the aggregators, which are people that have, raised billions of dollars now to buy up FBA businesses and build a portfolio of them. They'll buy it from an owner operator and they'll just have their team operate it, but they're still paying for it as if they were going to owner operate it. Other people will look at it and go, look, we have to price it as an owner operator. So the salary of an owner is an add back, and it does go to the bottom line discretionary earnings. But if you're going to buy it and you're going to put your own person in place, you're going to pay somebody $75,000 a year to run it. That has you paying a higher multiple, and you'd have to say, look, I'm not going to owner operate it. I've got to put somebody in place there. So I need to negotiate a little bit more off the purchase price. And that's okay for you. And that's what you should do if that's what you're going to, how you're going to operate the business. The only challenge is that if you're competing against lots of other buyers that are owner operators, they're not going to need a lower value for the business. They're not going to put somebody else in there to operate it. So you just get a little bit more challenged in terms of the ability to negotiate, because you're going to have to hire somebody to run it.
That's interesting. That is a very interesting perspective. And I think that the kind of the moral of this is you've got to figure out, as you said, 99% of the people are owner operators, but most, you said, of the vast majority of those are not 40 plus hours a week operating day in, day out. They're still involved, maybe to the extent that they choose to be involved, but they don't have to be involved. They're not the linchpin around which everything hinges and makes the business operate. And that is what makes a business less valuable. If you've set up a business, if Joe owns ABC Incorporated and Joe has set up the systems, which you use that word systematize, which I love. That's the third step in exit without exiting, which I teach. But if you systematize and process put processes in place, and you can kind of from the backside kind of coach people to do that, that makes your business more valuable than you having to be the guy grinding all those decisions. Number one sales guy, number one code writer, number one finance guy, number one bookkeeper. Like if you're that person, your business is going to be worth less money.
Yes,
Let me ask.
Yeah, because if you're working 80 hours a week and you're giving yourself a salary, I cannot do 100% add back of your salary because you're working more than 40 hours a week. I have to put in a negative add back as if we're going to replace the other 40 hours.
Sure.
And so it's going to sell for less money, basically. So you're absolutely right. I know that you're about to move on to something else, but as I say, and the people are listening that are not in the not in the online world, and they're thinking 30 hours a week, I'm grinding it out, 60 working for the man right now. That's a dream. That's a utopia. Why in the world would they ever sell? And the reason people sell is often entrepreneurs get burned out. They get shiny objects syndrome. They want to move on to something else. But also when it's growing rapidly, like I sold a business a year and a half ago for about $5 million. I'm sorry, it did about $5 million in revenue in the third year. So it was only 3 years old. It went from 0 to 5 million in revenue, and it was a physical product business. Every penny of revenue, spare revenue that came from that company went right back into buying more inventory just to keep up with demand. They took hardly anything out of it. The only way that they could really get some cash out of the business was to sell it. Either that or hold on for a much longer period until things got balanced. But they just got burned out and were wanting to de-risk and get rid of some of the, they're sending $500,000-$600,000 overseas every month for more inventory, and that felt very risky for them. So that's why people sell, because they don't actually take a lot out in the early years when it's growing rapidly.
Yeah, well, I think that makes sense. Certainly what I'm coaching my clients and students to do is to make sure that you don't get caught in that trap where the only way to make money is to sell it. But honestly, that isn't specifically for the online world. That is more for and I don't want to say brick and mortar because they're not all brick and mortars, but more traditional offline businesses. So, but let me kind of shift gears for the last few minutes of our show together. I want to ask you about success, because you're obviously very successful. You hit your $50,000 mark early, and you far surpassed that over the years. You've been successful financially. You've been successful with all the things that you've wanted to succeed with. But I wonder, because the show's name is The Root of All Success, how do you, Joe, define the word success?
Peace of mind. Simple as that. 3 words: peace of mind. And even though I've had great success in business and financially, as an entrepreneur, cash flow is key, right? That's the ability to just step away from everything as long as you've still got the cash flow. And so you have 2 choices: exit without exiting, which brilliant. You're still an exitpreneur if you exit without exiting.
Right.
Just a variation of the initial concept. Or build up enough cash so that you can just live off of it. And that takes more time. So for me, success for me is now defined as peace of mind. And that comes with, a happy family, a good life, and knowing that I don't have to worry about, my financial future. So peace of mind for me.
Listen, out of all the times I've asked that question, nobody's ever used those 3 words. I think a lot of the sentiment is behind the same answers, but peace of mind is a very clarifying way to state that. It's, do I have peace in energy, money, finances, relational, how am I at peace in those things, or am I still striving for extra or more or the next thing? So I love that definition. So that's really good. Now, with that definition in mind, do you consider yourself a successful person?
Yes.
I love it. I love the confidence. I love the confidence in that, man. And I think that, about half the time people answer that question immediately like you did, and other times they kind of stumble on their words but they ultimately, yeah, I'm successful at what I wanted to accomplish. Now, everybody wants to accomplish different things. And I think my definition of success is achieving the results that you wanted. Like, what did you want? Like, if you wanted peace of mind, as you said, Joe, and you achieve peace of mind, you're a success. If you want to make a gazillion dollars, well, when you hit a gazillion dollars, you're successful. Like, everybody's definition is going to revolve around what desire or result they wanted, right?
That doesn't mean, Jason, that I still don't have imposter syndrome now and then, right? I just, am I the right person to be talking about this? And am I really qualified to write a book to help online entrepreneurs change their economic future and be an exitpreneur, whether they exit and walk away or exit without exiting? You still have that doubt, right? I can say yes, period, and say I'm successful. By all measurements, I am successful. But that doesn't mean I still have days where it's like, okay, am I really that qualified to say what I'm saying? And I was having lunch with somebody yesterday. First time I've had lunch with somebody in a long time. He read my book, doesn't live too far from me, got an intro from somebody I know, trust, and respect. And we're outside having lunch, and he kept talking about my book. I'm looking around going, God, I guess I'm an author now. He's keep talking about it. These other people can hear it. And in your book, you said this, so yeah, I'm successful, but doesn't mean I don't occasionally have imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs deal with that, especially in the public figure space. So a lot of entrepreneurs are behind the scenes. Nobody really knows what's going on. But like, I would be considered a public figure because I'm a podcast host, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, I'm a consultant, I got an online university. So I'm in the public eye. And a lot of people like me, and I suffer from it too, is that imposter syndrome. It's like, why would people listen to me? And then you're always thinking, what does that guy think of me for real? And I've got friends who I know listen to this podcast religiously. So hello, they listen and they tell me they listen and they like the show. But I'm telling you, some of those people are in the back of my mind every single time I do a show. I'm thinking, what is he going to think? What is she going to think? So that imposter syndrome is something all of us deal with. And I love that you're honest enough to say that you still deal with it, even in light of all of the success or quiet light of all the success that you've experienced. You like that? Quiet light brokerage.
There you go.
So tell everybody two things. I want to talk about two things as we finish up. I want you to tell everybody about Quiet Light Brokerage and about what you guys do and how people could engage you if they want to either buy or sell a business. And then also, when we get done talking about Quiet Light, I really want to circle back to your book and kind of finish on that note and talk about how to get to your book and why people need to read it. So start with Quiet Light.
Quiet Light is a M&A firm focused solely on online business and operated by entrepreneurs. Every advisor is not like some kid hired out of college and taught to be a broker. Every advisor is an entrepreneur first and foremost. They've all built, bought, or sold their own very successful online business. They are ridiculously qualified to do what they do. And they help first. We prefer to have a conversation a year or two in advance of somebody exiting their business. It's the best way to help. And it's again, back to my mentor, Walter, when I was talking about this company that I was joining and becoming a partner. And he's like, Joe, it sounds like you just give everything away for free and hope that they eventually choose you as their advisor. I'm like, exactly, Walter. That's what we do. Still though, people get hesitant to talk to a quote unquote broker or quote unquote advisor. So segue into the book. I had to write the book because not everyone is going to want to talk to an advisor and take that time. And they're not going to be able to absorb all the information that we have to share about the value of their business and what they should be doing to improve it, what they need to do to change it, what the dangers are about that one SKU wonder that they have. So I had to write the EXITpreneur's Playbook. I had to put it all together in writing so that lots and lots of people could understand the true value of what they have and become an exitpreneur, either by selling or, again, exit without exiting. Even if it's not with me or with you, we're helping, we're teaching, they're learning, and they're becoming better entrepreneurs because they understand now that what they're operating is probably their most valuable asset. And there's certain things they need to pay attention to that they haven't before because it's just not their thing, as my teenager likes to say. Well, you need to make it your thing because this thing could be worth, enough money that you can retire and have that peace of mind that so many people desire and deserve.
How could people get access to your book? Where could they buy it?
EXITpreneur.io. They can buy the book there. They can actually download a free chapter or two. There's a few that I've offered up. One is the chapter 11 on ad backs, which is the most critical chapter. I swear, if they download that alone, it's free. I'm pretty confident that that will open up, people's minds enough, add at least minimum $10,000 more to the value of their business than they thought. And I've seen, people go from, I don't have a sellable business to, oh my goodness, this is actually worth $1 million. So EXITpreneur.io, or just go to Amazon and search for EXITpreneur and it should show up right at the top.
All right. Well, I want to encourage the listeners to do that, because the people who listen to this show are in every on every segment of the spectrum of entrepreneurship. There's people on one end that haven't started yet. They're still W-2 employees. They've got this burning idea and desire. They want to do something. They haven't done it yet. And so for them, exiting doesn't even seem like they haven't even entered yet. But you and I both know, and you might even want to speak to this, is that if you don't plan that exit in the beginning, you're actually building a dungeon. A building with no exit is a dungeon. Torture happens there. So if you're going to architect and build a business, you got to think about that day one. So I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about it. And then the other side of the spectrum is you've got people like you, right? Super successful, many zeros behind their net worth and their revenues because they've built amazing businesses. And they're just looking for that little, how do I do it a little better? And that's why they listen to the show. And then there's everybody in between. But I want to ask you, and I ask every guest this, like at the end of the show, what would you say to that person on the first side of that spectrum where they haven't yet started? They don't really know what to do yet. They're just not certain. What's your advice as a successful exitpreneur yourself?
And I'm talking to a future entrepreneur or somebody.
Yeah, someone on the beginning end, whether they've started or not, like they're right there at the very beginning of that entrepreneurial journey, whether they've started it or about to start it or just started it.
It's actually pretty fundamental, and it's got to do with math, and that's keep your overhead low. Right? Don't buy that, the way that you described it at the beginning was, you buy that $500,000 house, you're never going to buy a $250,000 house. You're going to get $750,000, $1 million, so on and so forth. If you keep your overhead low, you not only, you can take the leap into entrepreneurship without as much stress financially. I talk about somebody in the book who had an opportunity to sell his business for $1 million, but it wasn't enough, because he had, 3 leases on BMWs that were $800,000 a month. And his overhead was just crazy ridiculous. And the business was declining, and it wasn't, supporting his high income lifestyle. But if you keep your overhead low, you can take that leap, because you're not going to make a whole lot of money early on. Yes, I did. I made $500,000 that first year. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule. I was in a service business. It wasn't a product business. There wasn't a lot of overhead. It was me and a phone and a fax machine, that kind of stuff back in '97. Keep the overhead low so that you already have the balls to take the leap and go and be an entrepreneur. But you got to have the lack of overhead in order to really pull it off financially.
That's great advice. I think a lot of entrepreneurs get caught in that success trap. They start making money, spend more money, make money, spend more money. And if you can keep that overhead low, I think that is a good piece of advice to learn from you as somebody who knows what to do. And I think that's the interesting part about the online business, is that if you do it right, there's really not any reason why you couldn't keep your overhead low in the online world. How can people get in touch with you personally, Joe? Are there places you want people to connect with you online?
Yeah, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just search for Joe Valley. You'll find me there, or hit me up at quietlight.com or exitpreneur.io. I'm easily accessible in all 3 places.
All right. So it's EXITpreneur. So it's just like entrepreneur, but change out the first 4 letters to exit, exitpreneur.io. And then it's quietlight.com. Yep. All right. And then look, Joe Valley, just like it sounds, Joe Valley. Go look him up on, you're on LinkedIn and probably Instagram, some other places as well, right?
You'll find me all over. Yeah.
Well, Joe, it's been an honor talking to you today. I really appreciate this. And I think that there's some stuff that you and I could probably do together in the future. I know that one of the things that I am currently planning, although we're still in the early stages of planning, is we're going to be doing the working title is kind of the exit mindset we're going to be doing a conference in Nashville in January 2022. So I don't know when this show is going to release, but I know certainly it'll be released before then. But kind of look up therealjasonduncan.com to find out where that event's going to be. And Joe, you and I may need to talk offline about how you and Quiet Light may be able to play a part of that, because I think that mindset of exiting, whether it's one of those three versions, whether it's the total exit or the exit without exiting that I teach, or the worst case, which is the financial exit, but you got to stay in physically. We're going to be talking about those three things. So thank you for being on the show. It's an honor, so very honored to talk to you, to meet you. I'm glad we met, and I appreciate the tip on Centurica, and I'm probably going to be reaching out to you to ask you some questions about some things, because I've got some personal things I want to talk to you about on buying a business. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. Yet another amazing entrepreneur telling you about his idea of success, which he said was peace of mind, which I think is a very clarifying way to say it. And then about how he went through his journey of starting online businesses, selling online businesses, ultimately becoming an exitpreneur. So you go look him up, like we said at the end there, EXITpreneur.io. Check out the book, go to his website, download chapter 11, which talks about some of the things we talked about on the show today. But thank you again to Joe Valley for being here. Now, before we sign off, before you hit the stop button on your podcast player or YouTube, let me tell you something. As an entrepreneur, you need to make sure that you're planning your business that you will ultimately exit, because ultimately you will. If you're trapped in your business, you're stuck in day-to-day operations, you're in the grind, as Joe talked about earlier in the show, you've got to get out of the grind so that your business is worth more money and you're living the ideal life that you actually want to live. So I've got an offer for you. Go to exitwithoutexiting.com. I want you to sign up for the next cohort that I start. I run an Exit Accelerator group coaching cohort. It runs 12 weeks. It's 8 one-hour sessions live with me and 11 other entrepreneurs. I limit each cohort to just 12. So we meet for 12 weeks, 8 times over those 12 weeks. And you're going to learn the 4 steps on how to exit your business, how to exit without exiting specifically. I'm going to talk about how you embrace delegation, how you eliminate stress, how you establish systems and processes, which we talked about on the show. And then finally, how you invest in people. How do you get those 4 things put together so that you can exit? So go to exitwithoutexiting.com. I've got a cohort that's starting very soon. We meet on Thursdays. Go check it out. And here's your offer. If you'll find me on Instagram or LinkedIn and send me a DM that says, hey, I want a discount to do your Exit Accelerator cohort. I heard you talk about it on the show, The Root of All Success. I will send you a coupon for that live coaching with me. So go to Exit Without Exiting today, check it out, and let's work together to get you to that ideal life that you deserve. Thank you for tuning in to The Root of All Success, where I interview people just like Joe, successful entrepreneurs who have learned how to be successful through trials and tribulations, successes and failures. And thank you for tuning in. Please tune again next time when I interview yet another amazing entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. Until then, I'm the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we invite you to visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Take charge of your business. Grow it from great to incredible. Join us again next time here on The Root of All Success.